We understate our significance over and over again because the scientists and the smart ones and the geniuses have told us. And so you have one hand, you have the reactionaries, and the other hand, you have the progressives and the revolutionaries, but they all understate who we are, our significance, and the centrality. They would liquidate the centrality of Africa and colonized people because they would place the centrality in the so-called working class. But this is industrial working class they're talking about. They say the main contradiction at the point of production. We say the main contradiction at the point of the bayonet. It's the bayonet. It's colonialism that's extracting all this value so that people are extracting a value of bauxite from places like Guyana and places in Africa, etc. Bauxite that goes into making cars. And so the worker who's in Detroit or the worker who's in France or someplace else making cars and stuff using those resources. The workers who working in these plants that are making computers, etc., exploited at the point of production. Well, where the hell does the bauxite come from? Where the hell does the resource, the chromium and everything necessary for the computers come from? That's the core question that gets overlooked. It didn't start in Detroit or France or something like that. It started among the colonized people and the land that we stand on, you and I right now. Nobody even talks about the indigenous people. They don't even get a discussion unless they're in the room. The reality is this is the colonial construct that everything rests on that. And this must be, we must force that. We must force that recognition upon especially those people the white people who love us. We have to force this recognition upon them because you are not going to get no communism, no socialism, all this stuff that you're looking for without dealing first with the colonial contradiction upon which everything rests.
Basically, over the last couple of days, Niger had a response to France. They said, you ain't got to go home, but you got to get the hell out of here. And so what's happened recently is that France is now withdrawing, and Macron has now has to mope around Paris with his proverbial tail between his legs. And so there's actually an article right out of Al Jazeera that recently came out on Sunday, which was actually detailing what was happening within Niger and what has subsequently happened. And I have covered what's going on in Niger over the last few weeks. And so I see this as a positive direction. Al Jazeera says France to withdraw ambassador troops from Niger after coup. And so this is actually from French President Emmanuel Macron. He says that his country will withdraw its ambassador and troops from Niger in the wake of the July coup that overthrew democratically elected President Mohamed Bazoum. He said France has decided to withdraw its ambassador in the next hours. Our ambassador diplomats will return to France. So he added that military cooperation was over and that 1,500 French troops stationed in the country would withdraw in the months and weeks to come with a full pullout by the end of the year. So I would just like to get your reaction to this latest developments that's happening in Niger.
I think it's extremely important what's happening in Niger because part of what we're just seeing, like some of the surface things in terms of France, having to move, but there's a lot of activity on the ground in Niger. I think you inferred that as a lead-in to this particular discussion. We are talking with some of the comrades on the ground in Niger, and as well as comrades. One of the remarks they were making, because as you know, a Nigerian president is the formal head of the ECOWAS, and they threatened military this and military that. And what happened was that there are Africans in Nigeria who said that no troops are going to come through a particular area of the territory they're not going to let them come through to attack Niger. And inside Nigeria, too, there's a great struggle around this question. And even the president of Nigeria has questionable legitimacy as far as the people in Nigeria are concerned themselves. And this whole notion that they're trying to bandy about in terms of the overthrow of democratic elected person or democracy. I mean, colonialism is the most anti-democratic thing that you can see. And French colonialism, somehow, what happened, of course, Bazoum, when they overthrew Bazoum, they overthrew France. That's what I think we have to understand, that colonialism is a absolutely, totally undemocratic institution that's been imposed on our people. So I think it's really important, and I think it gives us room, and we can see space that's happening. There's a lot of discussion and mobilization in Niger, beyond simply only the military forces, etc. So there's a space to advance a deeper revolutionary process there. Because even as we talk about France getting out, and we've seen in some places, I don't remember if Niger was characterized much by the destruction of French flags, and then the carrying of the Russian flag. Or certainly we saw that in Mali and places like that. But Russia's not going to free us. I didn't see the red, black, and green flying anywhere. And the thing is that for us to be free, we're going to have to become conscious of our interests as African people. Borders got to come down so that we become less vulnerable. All these borders facilitate the extraction of value from Africa and divisions among us. So that's really important. But yes, we think that what's happened in Niger is important. What happened in Mali is important. It's breaking up the entire construct, the colonial construct is under serious assault here. And not just there, but it's also true in the United States. I mean, the entire colonialism as a mode of production is under severe stress. I mean, it was white people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th, who defecated on the desk of or in the halls of this hallowed place, and chased the vice president of the United States throughout the Capitol, threatening to hang him. That wasn't the African People's Social Party, wasn't the Uhuru movement. It's the statement of just the depth of the crisis that has now enveloped the entire colonial mode of production, and there is no way out of this for them. What we have to do again is to become more conscious of what our own interests are and fight to achieve our interests, to identify and achieve our interests. So yeah, we feel really good about what we've seen up to now, but the real deal is going to be the power of the people, and we're going to have to discuss this issue. We don't even hear people talking about power, revolutionary, the workers, the African workers, or any workers for that matter. That discussion hasn't been on the table for a long time, and I think that's something that's reemerging today. When we look at Niger, we look at Mali, we look at various other places where we are located. Did you see, for example, the president of Colombia did this interview, I think, on Democracy Now! And he's talking about how people are rejecting this definition of reality and democracy that's been imposed on them at gunpoint by the colonizers. And this is something that's happening globally. That the fact of the matter is the genie is out of the bottle, and they're not going to be able to put it back in.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at it right now, I just looking at just the rhetoric that's coming out. This is actually out of ABC News. They were actually doing a report. It says Niger's junta said in a response that the announcement signals a new step towards the sovereignty of the country. Quote, imperialist and neocolonialist forces are no longer welcome in our national territory. The new era of cooperation based on mutual respect and sovereignty is already underway. And so, as you can see right now, there is really just a resistance against capitalism, colonialism, imperialism that you can see on a more micro scale here in the United States, in the Imperial Core, where you have a lot of workers that are rising up against really totalitarian rule within the workplace. But then you can see it on a macro scale, how you have not only these African countries that are saying absolutely not to this imperial rule, but they're even looking at different blocks to join in order to say no in regards to, like, for instance, the expansion of BRICS when it went from 5 countries to now 11 countries. And that's just the first phase. And now they're trying to do at even a second phase, which will include even more African countries within the second phase. And so I think they just put in Ethiopia and the first phase. And so that's the Horn of Africa, which has a lot of resources, especially in minerals as well as oil. And so we're seeing that they are really waking up. And this is something that I think that is deeply important for especially those of us Black people to really pay keen attention to.
I think that's right. And I think also, we recognize the strategic significance of what we're seeing. And we also recognize certain limitations because, the India, as which is one of the BRICS, the acronym stems in part from India's involvement, but it also blocked Algeria for coming into the BRICS. It blocked Algeria from coming in. So there are contradictions there. But in general, I agree with you. And even if you look at South Africa, you talk about South Africa and the oppression of African people in South Africa, the destitution of people that's enforced by the African National Congress and always was there enforced by them, killing miners, if you remember, doing just a strike on our own land and just wanted better wages for extracting our gold and stuff like that was going to be sent to colonial countries. So we recognize this as a really important strategic development that we're seeing in terms of this assault that's being made against the colonial mode of production. But we also recognize our responsibility to take it beyond this. We have to take it beyond this. The people have to have power. People have to have power in Mali and Niger and other places. The people have to have power in South Africa, have to have, revolutionary organization, revolutionary movement guided by scientific revolutionary theory, and which is the kind of work that we try to do and that we try to impart, like on Struggles Everywhere. But generally speaking, we agree with you 100% that this is these are really important developments, traumatic developments. We believe existential developments as far as the existing social system is concerned. The existing world order has definitely run into a major contradiction. We say that we have encountered like an uneasy equilibrium. And in fact, this one that sees history now moving toward concretely toward the future, as opposed to the attempt by those who would maintain this colonial equilibrium by having people trapped in this parasitic relationship with colonial capitalism.
Mm-hmm. There was a recent reading that I was doing because I'm, finishing up my reading of Assata Shakur's autobiography.
Right.
And one of the things that she actually talked about was that as far as revolution is concerned, it can't just be an emotional, just go guns blazing when it comes to fighting against imperialism, colonialism. It has to be a scientific process, which we have to look at the projects of like the Bolshevik Revolution, the Chinese Revolution, looking at the Cuban Revolution, things like that, and what they did and how they actually got the people to be on board, because it realized that they had to liberate themselves, and by means of their own understanding of their power, then that's how they can be on board for revolutions and liberation. And so you basically just reflected to me what Comrade Assata Shakur was basically saying. And so I think this is really important for a lot of us to take to heart, is that we will not be free until we get ourselves to a point where we see that, number one, our liberation is imperative for the world because it's used as a division tactic. The anti-Blackness that we see within this country is used as a division tactic to keep the working class divided. And then on top of it, because we are constantly being divided, then we are seen as second-class citizens, when in reality, if we were to push for our liberation, it would be a domino effect to liberations of many other peoples, even within this imperial core. Do you agree or disagree?
Well, I think I agree with the basic principles that you're talking about. I think one of the reasons that this government attacked us, and because I think that we are an essential part of a revolutionary project that deconstructs the whole colonial capitalist social system as it articulates itself and represents itself here in the core, as you characterize it in various other places in Africa. I think that one of the things that the intentions of this attack on us was to push us into a precipitous kind of action, to push us into a situation that we could not sustain, to push us either underground, make us run, or make us get involved in actions that that would lead to our destruction of this movement, this overall movement. And what has to happen, of course, is that we have to understand what it took to put this thing together. Where does it come from? Did Jesus or Allah or somebody just give all this power and resources to them? You made the statement, you said that something to the effect that that capitalism divides us, etc. But capitalism itself has its origin in colonialism. And when you talk about things like, because effectively what we are talking about when we talk about racism and things like that, part of what we are talking about is the superstructure, ideas, institutions, and things like that, born of an economic base. The economic base, we say, is colonialism. Everywhere, it's colonialism. And then the ideas that get promoted, the ideas that grow from that are groomed and developed from that of what people might call racism. It's the philosophy, the ideology that we have, that we see and are influenced by, that turns an ordinary white worker who should be just a white worker, who should be on the side of the oppressed all around the world. But this person now is more influenced in terms of ideology and philosophy, not even by his own long-term interests, but is more influenced by the ideas that stem from this colonial economic base. This is where the ideas come from. The legal system come from. The culture is influenced by this relationship. So you don't even have to get a group of white people together and teach them to be racist or to hate black people and things like that. It's a natural consequence of the relationship that based on the oppression, exploitation of all this value. Look at what we've seen around the world. Where have revolutions happened? Where have they happened? Where have they tried to happen? The most significant way. It's in all of the colonized situation, whether it's in Detroit, Vietnam, all these other places, Cuba. It's under the colonial, people are colonized. This is where the class contradiction is. We say the class contradiction is consolidated, is located within the colonial contradiction. That's where the locus of the class contradiction in the world is the colonial question. And I'm not one of those, by the way. I'm not, some anti-communist. I'm saying that you can't get to communist. The road to socialism is painted black. That's effectively what we're saying, that if you're really interested in transforming this world, you cannot do it without recognizing centrality. Could there be a capitalism without the genocide committed on the indigenous people in this country? If the indigenous people would be able to realize their aims, and most of the oppression and exploitation of the indigenous people revolves around the fact that their land has been absolutely taken away from them. All the resources from this land. Where's the capitalism going to come from if you don't have this land? If there weren't concentration camps that they call Indian reservations, where is the capitalism going to come from if you don't have African people who will push all around the world, developing value, not for us, but the value for this system? And where do the ideas come from that influence ordinary white people who ought to be on the right side of history to push them on the wrong side of history? Because the fact is that their 401ks and their ability to get this and that cheap gasoline, cheap labor and what have you is the result of this colonial construct. And this is a colonial mode of production. That's the argument that we are making. And that this is the blind side of those people who claim that they're looking to find communism, but would challenge the Black Revolution, the Mexican Revolution, the struggle of Puerto Rico, that we said, because somehow we're dividing the working class. Hell, we're not dividing the working class. They're struggling in our own interests, and we recognize that our interests are inseparable from the interests of the working peoples of the world. But you can't get to that communism you want without traveling this black highway. The road to socialism is painted black. And that's the basic point that we would make. I hope that wasn't too complicated.
No. The thing is that my brain is a little bit simpler than what I would like for it to be. But at the same time, I'm picking up what you're throwing down, which I really appreciate. And this goes into the whole notion that those of us who are Black can't take the notion of race and class actually being intertwined, when in reality, it is the colonial construct that actually put race and class together.
You've got it. This is a question that seemed to have stymied, revolution in 1960, the relationship between race and class, colonialism. That's the relationship. And it's a colonial construct. I mean, even when Marx was writing Capital, where did he get the money from? He was starving. He was poor. He was not the working class, but he was badly off. Where did he get the money from? He got the money from Engels, who got the money from his father, who was a capitalist, who also was making much of his money from slavery that was in the Caribbean in terms of textile and stuff like that. That's where Marx got his money from. So it's these Africans who he could not see, who were picking cotton and what have you, that made it possible for him to visit the London Museum on a regular basis, to go to these magnificent libraries and do all of this work, do all of this study. It was the Africans who were able to do, Africans who were enslaved. The political economy rests upon this foundation that Marx himself was kind of able to say has the same relationship to political economy as original sin in theology. So Africans have agency, and we have to assume responsibility. This charge that somehow I'm a Russian agent is a denial of the fact that we have agency, we have consciousness, we know what's happening to us, we know that we have to be free. Don't take a Russian, don't take Joe Biden or Vladimir Putin to tell us that we are oppressed and that we have to be free. We have agency. We can find our own way, and this plays into this whole concept that governs much of the world. And the assumption is that people will really believe in this stuff because Black people don't have enough sense to know that we have a future that we should be able to carve for ourselves. So the Russians, the big bad Russians, told the innocent, naive Black people to do this criminal kind of stuff, et cetera, that's against the interests of the good America, this democratic America. No. We have agency, and that's what we're claiming.
The Russians didn't place drugs in our community like the CIA did. It wasn't the Russians that came in that gave us austerity, and it's not the Russians that are making it so that me as a disabled person doesn't have enough to survive on from disability benefits. It's not them. In fact, if anything, I saw the truth for what it was and became a communist because of the capitalist system, and I saw how bad it was and how bad it is. So that's basically what it is.
And we don't have Russian last names, do we?
Oh. No.
Yeah, we don't have Russian last names.
No.
And as Muhammad Ali said a long time ago about the Vietnamese, ain't no Russian ever called us nigga. That's not our legacy. Our relationship to this system we are informed by our relationship to this system and not by Russians. This is what informs us. This is what drives us to say that there has to be a different kind of social system. This is what makes us communists and socialists and revolutionaries and what have you. Not some damn Russian any more than some letter from I've forgotten what it's called now. From some slave master turned us into disliking each other, and that whatever it's called, I've forgotten it now. Such a silly thing that so many Africans were connected to this, that we've been tricked. The dark skins against the light skins, and the all of this kind of silliness. Yeah, that's the petty bourgeoisie that does. If that were the case, if it were that simple, you wouldn't have had a knee on the neck of George Floyd. They wouldn't have to have the police in our communities in every instance. They wouldn't have to have National Guards and all those folk killing us. Ain't no advice given by some slave master to trick us. Never been the case. It's the military, it's the arms, it's the state, the colonial state that's done that to us. Anyway, but yeah, all right, comrade.
Yo, this has been a fantastic conversation. I just want to do just a little bit more of a point before I let you go, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay. So there was a point that I wanted to also bring out, and a lot of people, this goes in line with what I wanted to talk about too. There's a paragraph here that I wanted to give a direction to the audience. It says, Andrew Leibovich, a research fellow at the Clendendale Institute, the think tank, said that the decision marks both an acceptance of a harsh reality for France in the region and may possibly put some limits on the U.S. deployments in Niger, though, as we have seen, U.S. and France have not followed exactly the same positionings in Niger. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about is that my point is, it's interesting how the U.S. is thinking about putting boots on the ground in Niger. This seems to be more than just a French problem, but a Western problem. They need Niger, as well as the other Sahel states, to be subjugated because those resources are that important. So basically, ultimately, when people think what's going on in these African nations, it's not just, oh, they're just racist. It's really because they want a subjugation because of the resources, because a lot of these European and Western nations really don't have the resources in order to be able to operate the way they do. So they literally have to go into Africa to steal the resources from the people in order to be able to have the power that they have. One of the things I try to tell people is Europe would be nothing without Africa. Europe would be just this desolate place with very little resources. But in order for them to be able to have the socially democratic wins that they've had over the last few decades, they've literally had to steal from the Africans in order to be able to have the universal health care and all these beautiful socially democratic policies that they enjoy. And people will say, oh, we need to go by the Nordic model. But the Nordic model actually means robbing Africans in order to be able to have something better for yourself in these countries. So is it really ethical for us to want to follow the Nordic model when in reality the Nordic model really is just a model of theft?
Well, Carmen Fauntleroy, you've actually brought us back to this whole question about the workers of the world and racism and all this stuff, because the truth of the matter is that Africans built the Eiffel Tower. Just the money that came from Haiti is what built the Eiffel Tower, and that's Haiti alone. The sidewalk cafes in Paris, etc., they come from extracting value from Africa. The fact is that the so-called the colonial tax that's imposed on something like 54 African entities that they call countries, that brings in billions of dollars annually, that the countries and heads of state themselves don't even see. They don't even know how much is extracted there. And when they ask the questions, they get overthrown, like Gbagbo in Ivory Coast, overthrown by France. And then the thing is that you have a situation where you ask the question about to say that Europe will be nothing without Africa. But the point is that there would be no U.S. without Africa. The point that I'm trying to make all along is that the foundation of this whole social system has its origin and that developed exponentially in colonial slavery and the attack on Africa. And this is the critical question that Africans have to really be able to grapple with. And this is not something that tries to stop you from being a communist or anything like that, but we have to really recognize the origin of this whole thing, and we won't get out of it. And like you said, that why is it that France noted to be, this great anti-fascist thing, it fought against the Nazis in the Second Imperialist World War, but at the same time they would bragging about fighting against Nazis, and they do that today. They were dominating people in Vietnam. They were dominating and murdering people in Africa, Algeria, all of this. So the colonial question is the real question. When you look at things like fascism versus democracy as they define it, you're looking at forms of the state. It's the colonial state that we are talking about. The foundation of it all has been colonialism, and Africa has been central to its emergence. I just saw maybe a couple of weeks ago, CARICOM just released a report dealing with this whole question of reparations that says that if you just look at the Caribbean alone, CARICOM, the Caribbean community, they said if you just look at the Caribbean alone and talk about reparations, and they calculated it in a very scientific way, that $131 trillion. That's greater than the total gross domestic product of the world. In other words, that they owe us more than there is money in the world to pay. And this is coming from CARICOM. You can get that, by the way. You can Google it and get this because it's really important kind of study. We understate our significance over and over again because the scientists and the smart ones and the geniuses have told us. And so you have one hand, you have the reactionaries, and the other hand, you have the progressives and the revolutionaries, but they all understate who we are, our significance, and the centrality. They would liquidate the centrality of Africa and colonized people because they would place the centrality in the so-called working class. But this is industrial working class they're talking about. They say the main contradiction at the point of production. We say the main contradiction at the point of the bayonet. It's the bayonet. It's colonialism that's extracting all this value so that people extracting a value of bauxite from places like Guyana and places in Africa, etc. Bauxite that goes into making cars. And so the worker who's in Detroit or the worker who's in France or someplace else making cars and stuff using those resources. The workers who working in these plants that are making computers, etc., exploited at the point of production. Well, where the hell does the bauxite come from? Where the hell does the resource, the chromium and everything necessary for the computers come from? That's the core question that gets overlooked. It didn't start in Detroit or France or something like that. It started among the colonized people and the land that we stand on, you and I right now. Nobody even talks about the indigenous people. They don't even get a discussion unless they're in the room. The reality is this is the colonial construct that everything rests on that. And this must be, we must force that. We must force that recognition upon especially those people the white people who love us. We have to force this recognition upon them because you are not going to get no communism, no socialism, all this stuff that you're looking for without dealing first with the colonial contradiction upon which everything rests. So I think it's important to say that. And in terms of looking at France and Niger and other places, at the same time they're talking about France. The United States has a minimum of 1,200 troops, and I say they're much more than that in Niger. And if you look at in this largest drone base in the world in Niger, and if you look at some of the videos of the American troops in Niger, who do you see? You see black people who are soldiers for America in Niger. And this is a profound contradiction. You can't get to that contradiction unless you understand the colonial contradiction, because Africans will be in when the French made war, tried to control the people in Vietnam. 71% of the people fighting to maintain Vietnamese colonialism were colonized people ourselves from Algeria, from Africa, and other places who the French had colonized. When the United States took up the mantle after France was crushed and Dien Bien Phu in 1954, the United States took it over. And then the majority of the Africans, the people on the front line, from 50 to 64% of American troops on the front line were Africans from this country.
Yeah.
So this is a critical question. They can't run nothing without us. And we have to be able to take ourselves seriously and recognize the centrality. And this is hard for African people to do. It's hard for us to recognize. In fact, if I'm saying this, I must be lying, because I didn't read that in no book, right? Because I'm saying what I know is to be the case because I used to say it myself. You know, I really don't take that too seriously, etc. But that's the truth. And this is the truth that we have to advance among our own people, to recognize our centrality, not only right now, but in the development of civilization itself. I mean, the barbarians have taken control of the goddamn world. Anyway, comrade. So I think that I think it's really important, the developments that we see happening in Africa, but not just in Africa. You know, I was mentioning the statement that's coming from the president of Colombia and other peoples everywhere. They're waking up and they're finding this arrangement to be intolerant. And this is a great trajectory strategically in terms of the movement. But we have to take responsibility for our own liberation. We can't be satisfied with the existence of a BRIC or how China is moving this way and Russia is moving that way. Their movement does not guarantee our liberation. What guarantees our freedom and our future is us, is we do that. And that's the thing that I'm saying. And that's something sometimes Africans have a difficult time grappling with, but it's the truth. But that's what we're building on. That's how we work. We are organizing to govern. That's what our objective is, to govern, to be a self-governing, self-determining people, and to disallow any other force in the world from doing that. Not only that, but governing under the leadership of the African working class that now has its own organization, its own revolutionary party, guided by revolutionary theory of African internationalism. That's what we see is the way forward.
Woo! Thank you so much for all that, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Man, you know what? And that's some good words for me to reflect more on, especially because it's just like the old saying goes, we save us. And I think that means that a lot of us are, people like myself, have to reflect more as an African, as how we can push for our liberation as a people. Because I mean, honestly, you know the phrase they say, nobody's free until we're all free. If we make sure to free ourselves, it's really a domino effect, because other people can free themselves as well too.
Well, I want to say that Africa is central to the whole question. That's why we have an African Socialist International. That's why we have one organization that stretches around the globe and what have you. We're small. We're, basically insignificant in terms of numbers. But what we represent is the potent thing that makes the United States government attack us. Not because they think we're working for Russians, but because they know we are working for Africa and Africans. And we are doing this in concert with all the other oppressed people and with the working people of the world. And we just know that the way to the liberation of all the workers, the emancipation of the working class internationally, that road leads through Africa. And that's the thing that we, concentrate on. And we do practical work. We're not just dreamers and stuff like that. Our activity is designed to negate colonialism, and which is the foreign and alien domination of any people, take over our economic, our political life and stuff like that. We've got more than 50 economic institutions in various places. Much of that's concentrated in St. Louis, where they attack radio station, furniture stores, markets that bring African people together to circulate capital within our communities, freeing up the brains of people so that young African people walking down the street that's been decimated by the various impact of colonialism, pushing us out of our community. They can see something now that represents a future that they can aspire to. So we see children in North St. Louis, they're playing basketball in the street, using bicycle rims for hoops. We organized and got we raised $150,000 and we got the land and then put $150,000 basketball court, state of the art basketball court in one of the most oppressed sectors in the community. And the money came from reparations. White people who voluntarily said, we want to pay reparations to Black people. We want to take responsibility for the crimes that we have taken as a people. We have in the United States, white people who are working in something like 140 different cities for reparations to African people, and also to we call it behind enemy lines, talking about the genocide being committed against Black people. Some people don't even know why the reparations workers issue is reverberating the way it is. Part of it because of that work. We conducted the first World Tribunal on Reparations in history. Never was a reparations tribunal. We did that in 1982. We created an organization for the first time, a mass organization around reparations. Never such an organization ever existed before. We had tribunals for something like 12 years. Leonard Jeffries was one of the persons who presented it. Tupac Shakur's mama presented a finished Shakur. Tupac was in the audience when that happened, etc. So this is the work that we've been doing. We are not just spectators who are flapping our gums talking about stuff. We're actually constructing the future, even as we are trying to disengage from this horrendous colonial past and present that we are dealing with. So I just wanted to say those things. That's who we are. And our objective is to govern. We're not in it just to be talking and to get more likes than anybody else and more views. And we're not the social media militants. You know, we're people who are actually engaged in trying to transform this world that we live in. Marx said it correct. In fact, he said philosophers have only interpreted the world in certain ways. The point is to change it. And that's what we're involved in doing. All right. So thank you very, very, very much, Brother Fauntleroy. By the way, I want to ask you, are you related to the Fauntleroys out of DC?
Maybe. I don't know. Look, it's
No, these are
masters and all that. So.
Okay, yeah, they ended up in the Congress and other kind of political thing. I was just wondering. I knew some of them. That's all. Uhuru.
Oh, thank you so very much. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to find them, so hopefully, you know,
Google it. Google it. Yeah.
I'll make sure to do that too.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Thank you so very much, Chairman Omali Yeshitela.
November 4th, we're having an anti-colonial free speech mobilization in Washington, D.C. All out to Washington, D.C. Get on the bus November 4th. Go to handsoffuhuru.org, and I'll see you there. Hope to see you there too, comrade. Uhuru.
Thank you so very much. Uhuru. Take care. Bye-bye.